Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. So in this video, I will be talking about the general pathology. So first of all, we will see about the introduction to this pathology. So basically this pathology, it is actually the study of diseases. So pathos means the suffering and logy means to study. So in this pathology, what we actually do, so it will involve the investigation of causes of disease and associated changes at the levels of cells, tissues, and organs, and which in turn give rise to the presenting signs and symptoms of the patient. So this is the called as the pathology. So actually we have two different terms here. One is the etiology and another is the pathogenesis. So in case of this pathology, we will see the different types of the terms. So common term which we see, that is the etiology. So etiology means what is actually the origin of the disease. So in case of the etiology, what we basically do, we actually see that why a disease arises. Then in case of the pathogenesis, we see that how that disease develops. So this is known as the pathogenesis and that is called as the etiology. Now moving further, so to see the diagnosis and the therapy in clinical practices, what actually pathologists do, they will first identify changes in the gross or microscopic appearance, that is called as the morphology of cells and tissues, and then they will see what are the biochemical alterations in the body fluids, for example in the blood or urine. And also these pathologists, so these pathologists, they also use variety of morphologic, molecular, or sometimes they will see the microbiologic, and then they will further go to immunologic techniques so that they can define the biochemical, structural, and functional changes that occur in cells, tissues, and organs when there is the injury. So in response to injury, they will go to these techniques to see. Now traditionally this discipline is divided into general pathology and systemic pathology. So we have here the general pathology and we have systemic pathology. So these are the two different portions of the pathology. Now in case of this general pathology, what we will see here actually, so firstly we know that, for example, we have a normal cell. So in case of a normal cell, this is having the homeostatic condition, that this is in normal condition, this cell is actually in normal state, the steady state. Then what happens when we introduce this cell to some stress or to some other external toxins or other factors? So what cell actually will do, it will try to adapt. So there happens the different types of adaptations to that particular stress. And for example, if this cell is having this unable to adapt, then what will happen? The cell will undergo the injury, that is called as cell injury, because this is actually the injurious stimulus that has been given to cell. Now further on, this cell injury, this may be of different types. For example, it can be the reversible injury, it can revert back to normal state. But sometimes the injury is very severe, then what happens at that time, the injury becomes this irregular injury, and that is the irreversible injury. So in case of the irreversible injury, what happens? The cell undergoes cell death. And this cell death, this is of two different types. One is called as the necrosis, another is called as the apoptosis. So this necrosis, this is basically a passive process, whereas the apoptosis, this is actually the active process. So these two different types of cell death through which the cell undergoes the cell death. Now further on, for example, here we have this is actually the normal myocyte. So in case of this normal myocyte, when the stress happens, what will it do? It will try to adapt to those stress conditions. So adaptation here is, it will increase in size, that is the hypertrophy of that myocyte. So the size of this myocyte will increase. So this is the normal myocyte. And when this normal myocyte, in case of this normal myocyte, when there happens this injury, that is the cell injury, it will try to, if this injury is very less, or it has the ability to revert back, so it will try to have the reversible injury. But sometimes when the severity of injury is more, it will undergo cell death. So here we have compared the two different types of the cells, the myocytes. So this is actually hypertrophic myocyte and this is actually the dead myocyte. So here we have staining. This shows that the staining has been reduced. So in this way we can differentiate between this dead myocyte and this hypertrophied myocyte. Now further on, so these are the different cellular adaptations to stress. So first adaptation is the hypertrophy. So in case of the hypertrophy, what actually happens? So basically the cell size is increased. For example, this is a normal myocyte. Now what will happen to this myocyte? This will actually increase in size. So this is actually the hypertrophied myocyte. So this is the hypertrophy. Now the next step is that what will happen? Next step, for example, sometimes the hyperplasia happens. So in case of the hyperplasia, what basically happens? So we have, for example, here this is a normal tissue which has the different types of the cells. So when the hyperplasia happens, when cell gets injured and it will try to adapt to those injurious conditions, what will it do? The cells will increase, the cell number will increase. So the number of cells increases in case of the hyperplasia, whereas in case of that hypertrophy, the cell size increases. Now further on, if there happens the atrophy, so in case of the atrophy, what will happen actually? So this is actually a tissue having different types of the cells. Now what will happen in case of the atrophy? In case of the atrophy, the number of cells get reduced. So we call it as the atrophy. Now further on, when we see the metaplasia, so in case of the metaplasia, this is a type of the cellular adaptation to stress where actually the cells are replaced by different types of cells. So for example, if we have here the columnar epithelial cells, so these columnar epithelial cells, they will be replaced with the smooth cells. So we will get these smooth epithelial cells. So this is called as the metaplasia. So these are the different cellular adaptations to stress.